Hey everybody, welcome back. We are here to present Matt Goes to the Movies and Mondays with Maximoff. I am super excited because not only is it a show that I was really hyped about, I am joined by Rob and Harrison from the Basement Binge. We agreed a little bit earlier before the show even aired that we were going to do this show together. So I am super excited to hear what they have to say. So Rob, Harrison, welcome, guys. I'm pumped. I know you guys were saying the same thing, that we're excited to get this going.
I mean, how long has it been since we've had new MCU content? You think back to the last time we had anything new, it was Spider-Man Far From Home, which was a lot of fun of a movie. And Matt, if you remember back to when we did our MCU ranking show, I kind of didn't feel good about where I had that one ranked, because it really was just so much fun. And you think about how we had talked about it. It's the MCU is such a huge, massive, just ungodly huge piece of culture that it required a full-length feature film to serve as the epilogue to the Infinity Saga. And we had all these plans. We had all of these things that Disney had laid out for us that we were supposed to get next. We were supposed to have already had Black Widow by now, and probably at least two other movies. I think we were supposed to have already had Eternals and possibly even Shang-Chi by now, potentially even the Multiverse of Madness. I'm trying to even remember what the timeline was like. And because of COVID-19, all that stuff got laid by the side, and we went an entire calendar year of 2020 without new MCU content. And the folks at Disney knew that we were starving for new stories from this world that we're so passionate about. And they dropped 2 episodes on us all at once, which I'm curious. I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about it. I'm curious if you guys think that was a great move on their part or something they needed to do.
Yeah, Harrison, welcome. Thanks for, co-hosting this journey with us here. What was your thought on that, about it dropping 2 episodes at once?
Well, first off, thanks for having me come back. I've been so excited for this. After the fun that it was to do the Mandalorian episodes with you, and then to have this break, I've been super excited to get, of course, to enjoy WandaVision. MCU has a special place in my heart, as it is what started the Basement Binge. But to get to do it with you and Rob, Matt, I was super excited about that. So to get to your question about the 2 episodes, I thought it was really good because, one, we haven't had any MCU content in a while. And I think one of the really strengths that allowed the MCU to be a consistent part of the zeitgeist is that it was always current. Movies and television have a weird half-life where the discussion around them doesn't last the longest. And the MCU maintains that discussion by always releasing content. And on top of that, WandaVision is a really new and unique and weird and take on the MCU, on comic books, superhero genre, on TV in general. It's very, very unique. Now, so I think it was good to kind of allow episode 1 to get us back in the MCU timeline and in that type of pop culture, for lack of better words, but also get us adjusted to the weirdness that WandaVision is, and then have a second episode where you just kind of got to enjoy that acclamation that you had in episode 1. So I thought it was a good pairing. I thought it was good to kind of get you warmed up through episode 1 and then allow us to enjoy it without having to wait an entire week.
Yeah, I totally agree on that. And to anyone listening to the episode, what we're doing here is, even though they did drop it in 2 episodes, we're going to review both, but we are going to review them in 2 separate content episodes. So you're going to have this one, and then we'll have a follow-up episode here that just simply focuses on episode 2. That way we can keep our thoughts, to each episode individually, and then, talk about how we feel as a whole, the 2 episodes, and what might that, be leading to. So for this, what we're going to do is, just like Mondays with Mandos, if you listen to that show, we're going to go ahead with a 2-minute warning here, where this is spoiler free. We'll each give our thoughts of what we thought of this episode, and then we're going to dig deep into what we think this means and what we thought of the overall show. So, Rob, I'll let you go first with the 2-minute warning here and your quick little snippet of episode 1 of WandaVision.
So, like I had mentioned, man, it was just so exciting to get new MCU content. I can remember Friday night, we knew we were getting 2 episodes. In fact, I don't think we knew until, was it Friday morning that we found out we were getting two at a time, or maybe Thursday? It was very quick. Or I should say, it was very close to the release time that we actually got that information. So there was quite a bit to be excited about. Now, initially, I had two thoughts right away when I found out they were dropping 2 episodes at the same time. My first thought was, holy crap, that's going to be really cool. We're going to be able to get a little more into the story, because we knew, based on the most recent trailers we had seen, that this show was going to be kind of trippy, really. Like, it was going to be fun. It was going to be an homage to classic TV, starting at the 50s, working all its way through the genres and the eras of classic television, and was going to change, and it was going to explore those tropes. We knew those things, but we also knew it was going to be a little bit wild and a little bit unlike anything we'd seen before. So to get a chance to really dig into that and have 2 episodes back to back that is going to help us really get into this world had me very excited. And then I remembered that when Marvel released Inhumans as a TV show on ABC, they released the first 2 episodes back to back, and I started to get less excited about it, because holy cow, was that a bad show. What a travesty that was. Fortunately, for anybody who's actually seen that, I apologize in advance that you had to sit through that. It was awful. It's probably the only Marvel related content I've never finished that I've actually started, because it was that bad. But so for this, we start to see kind of the cracks a little bit. We have every reason to believe going into this, and I'm not giving anything away at this point, that this was probably going to be an alternate reality that Wanda created within her own mind, most likely, to deal with the trauma, to deal with what is likely post-traumatic stress syndrome of all of the terrible events that have happened in her life up to this point. So we had every reason to believe it, especially because we've seen Marvel adapt their classic comic storylines to some extent in the MCU. And there's been plenty of opportunities where we've seen Wanda in the comics, kind of. Certainly House of M, I think, is the first one everybody thinks of when they think of alternate worlds created by Wanda. And there's certainly reason to believe that they're adapting aspects of that for this. So to really kind of start to see where, right at the very beginning, these characters sort of know something's off. And you kind of see that, but then they sort of go with it. And as you go through it, it becomes more obvious that Wanda is aware that something is off, and Vision doesn't. He knows something's off, but he's not aware why he knows anything. So it definitely leads you to believe that it's more Wanda related. Growing up as a kid, I can remember watching Nickelodeon all the time, and I was into, Guts and Legends of the Hidden Temple and all of those kind of shows. And I forget which one, the one where they're at the camp, that one was really funny. I'm struggling to remember the name of it, but I would remember watch all those shows, and Ren and Stimpy. And then at some point, for whatever reason, it stopped being about kids shows, and Nickelodeon kind of it was like maybe 8 o'clock at night or whatever. They flipped over to Nick at Night. And I never understood it as a kid, but I happened to just see some of these when I'd be visiting my grandparents. So I had seen all these episodes of Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie and all of these shows that, at least the first 2 episodes, clearly draw their influence from and are very strongly tied to. Certainly some of the animation is right out of some of those shows. If I have to imagine that most people who are big MCU fans have probably not watched a lot of those, Nick at Night kind of TV shows. And I don't know if you guys have or not, but to me, it was kind of nostalgic. Not that I would ever sit down and watch any of those ever again on purpose, because I'll tell you what, they really do not hold up well over time. They really don't. But the kind of the innocence of it, the corniness of it, the kind of the farcical nature of it, it's definitely an homage to those old shows. And I sort of enjoyed that aspect of it because of kind of remembering watching those as a kid. I've definitely seen people who have been online saying that these were both kind of boring episodes and not a whole lot was really going on, but there's enough intrigue on top of sort of the background silliness, which you're already aware probably isn't real anyways. There's some out loud laughs, but there's enough going on to keep the hook baited for me. Where when we're talking about next week getting into the third episode, I'm very excited to see what's going on. And as this show continues down the track, how crazy it's probably going to become. And really, I have to say right out of the gate, these two together are phenomenal on screen. Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, we didn't really see a ton of it in the films they were in together. They had some moments on screen, but holy cow, these two on screen together have amazing presence and chemistry. And it really sells. They're able to pull off the campiness. They're able to pull off the funny parts. They're able to pull off the kind of moments where you go, whoa, what is going on here? What's happening? And they do it very well. So I'm excited to see what happens next.
Yeah. Harrison, what's your thought on episode 1 and where it kind of left you?
Yeah, I like I said, the MCU has a special place in my heart, as it's what started the Basement Binge podcast for myself, and was like the only content that I consumed for so long, and it's been gone. It's been absent for a long while. So that's led me to kind of explore other avenues of film, maybe a little more pretentiously. And so coming back to the MCU, I had this, I don't know what word I'm searching for, hoity-toity idea that, it's not going to be as good as, something else more serious and more, important. But the second that MCU Marvel Studios logo started with the music, I was just right back to like, this is the best thing ever. Why would I ever think that anything in this MCU was not worthwhile? And it just immediately brought me back to like the joy and excitement of the MCU. And, people have always compared the MCU to like how it's episodic. They call it episodes. I'm excited to really experience that, and the continuity, the continual of excitement of, when's that next MCU film coming out in a weekly TV show, and just all that excitement through the simple, opening title music just brought that all back. But in the actual episode, I really agree with what Rob said. Growing up watching I Love Lucy, I watched that a lot with my mom. That's the one I remember the most. I even watched Bewitched, Full House, kind of a little bit, not so much, but it's interesting to see. Well, this is weird. The MCU is getting weird, and I love how much they allow it to just be what it is. Be a 50s sitcom with the production design, the aspect ratio, the black and white, the way that the effects are done very practically, the way it's filmed in front of a live studio. Honestly, like, it just lets it be what it is. And the casting, like Rob said, is, I think, probably the best part. Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, even Catherine Hahn, they're all just so great. And the way that Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany are able to have this chemistry together and this quirkiness and this weirdness, it's like Sarah Finn knew that this would eventually be what their roles were when she cast them forever ago, because they do it so well. And so, these episodes were slower. We're not getting into like the predicted, theorized multiverse altering, timeline that the WandaVision series is going to create. We're warming up to that, and it's just like funny gags, humor. You're just getting, a little bit of teaser for the intensity and that's going to come, but just let it be fun and let it be lighthearted. And Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen just made that a lot of fun. And it was like, I don't know. I don't know why I expected it to just be so intense from the moment the episode started, because that's just way too extreme. And it was fun. It was simple. It was funny. It was just the right amount of everything to get me warmed up to Vision and Wanda and their relationship and what that's going to mean for the rest of the show. And I'm just excited. I'm excited for where it's going to go, because if they can handle these first 2 episodes that, in all honesty, are so simple, but make them so enjoyable without overdoing it, I'm just super excited for what's going to come, because it was just handled very well. Obviously, when we get into spoilers, There's so many things to talk about, so many details. That's the other thing I love. We're going to have a TV show, 8, maybe 9 episodes that we're going to be able to dissect and take apart. And there's so many things that may mean something really important. Only time will tell. But whether it means something important or not, it's a reference to something that a fan enjoys. And it's just fun to be back in that spirit of the MCU and have it be something that's just so fun as Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen just being totally loony in black and white. And it's just lots of fun.
Yeah.
What's it?
Yeah, Rob, go ahead.
Say real quick. Yeah. So, we were just kind of talking about how and how great these two are on screen together and how silly some of these moments are. There was parts in both of these episodes, and I know we're focusing primarily on the first one, but you kind of forget that this is probably all in her head or a constructed reality because of how well they pull off. Like, you kind of forget, like, this is an old TV show style, and these two have powers and abilities the average person does not. And in the case of Vision, he's an android and not even really a person. Like, you kind of forget that because of how well they pull that off. This could just as easily have been an episode of Bewitched for as well as they do it. And I think that that's really going to pay off in future episodes as the edges start to creep in, as this facade that it appears Wanda's creating starts to have light peer through, and she has to address the fact that for all of the way she's trying to escape her PTSD, there's something there that it's just going to keep creeping through. And I think the way that they do this and just the way you kind of forget what you're actually watching, I think when we eventually land a really hard impact punch later in this season, it's going to really hit.
Yeah. I love this episode. I was actually really surprised at how much I enjoyed it based on the fact that it really is at its core just simple, and it's so far from anything that we've gotten from the MCU. I mean, even I think you guys would agree because, Rob, you and I did our recap episodes. Harrison, you did, your recaps twice, actually. You did things individually, and then you did rewatch throughs of where you originally ranked them. Even in the worst movie that we thought of the MCU, there's action, there's big things. And this is just such a simplistic right now episode and story so far that I really was surprised at how much it captured me. And what I'm going to say is I don't have anything else to say other than I love the episode. So listeners, if you for some reason haven't watched this episode, this is the part where you pause it, you go watch it, you come back and you listen, because I just need to get into spoilers. I just need to talk about it in depth.
Yes. Yes, definitely.
And yeah, Harrison, I'll throw this to you first. You guys both mentioned it in your recap. One of the things that immediately caught me off guard was I could not stand the fact that Wanda and Vision were supposedly supposed to be an item from somewhat of Civil War to Infinity War. It was so unbelievable to me that all of a sudden these two characters had feelings for each other. But for whatever reason, and maybe it's the lack of MCU content or whatever, these two just popped off the screen for me. It actually finally felt like they were a couple that they wanted to be together, which for me, again, and you guys both mentioned this, it makes it a little bit sad already because none of this seems real. And whether or not it's going to be that Wanda has an influence of this, because there's some things that happen in this episode that make you believe that she might not even be fully in control of what's happening here. And it's not just her own accord that could be doing this, which would make it even sadder if she finds out that this is all being like fed to her, so to speak. So I was really caught off guard by how much I actually like them being a couple compared to the the past tense of I just didn't understand how it was believable that these two were together. Harrison, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. As reading the comments, I knew that in some storylines in the comments, Wanda and Vision are a couple, they're an item, and that leads to a lot of great story threads. Rob mentioned House of M. But in the MCU and the films, particularly in Civil War, I always felt like it was kind of weird that it was, if you didn't know that those two were written as a couple, it felt kind of out of nowhere, you know? And especially in Infinity War, I felt like it was rushed. And if I hadn't known that they were an item previous to experiencing the MCU, I think I would have been more caught off guard. So yeah, I've always felt the same way. Like that relationship seems rushed. It doesn't seem very fleshed out. We're just seeing the glimpses of it. We're not seeing the moment where it progresses. But for whatever reason, this series starts, and I got to give it to the actors Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen. When they're together, when they're talking about how they're a strange couple, or that moment where like Vision is like, Wanda, get the lights, and they like move their beds together, like all of those moments felt like a genuine relationship. Like these are two people who just deeply want to be together and deeply enjoy each other's company as a married couple would. And it's weird to have those two experiences in my head where in the films I'm like, this relationship isn't totally fleshed out. And now like this is one of the most genuine relationships I've seen in the MCU, and I love it. It also kind of adds to the sadness. I had written down somewhere, if we're going to theorize, well, I think all of us are, that what we're seeing is some alternate reality or pocket universe or whatever it's going to be. It's something that Wanda is using her powers to create, or someone is using to inflict upon her in some way. It's not actual reality. And I wrote down, that when her brother Pietro dies, she just kind of lashes out and kills a bunch of robots. But when her boyfriend dies, like she creates a whole pocket universe. Like there's something in my head that like has some disconnect there because of the lack of depth of that relationship between Wanda and Vision in the films. But I'm totally sold on it in the series alone. They're doing such a good job. And maybe that's to add to the fake reality that it is. But either way, the characters, I'm totally endeared to their relationship.
Yeah. Rob.
I'm all the way in on that too. And, you kind of mentioned it. Throughout the MCU, they really kind of do a crap job of trying to set relationships up in advance. Matt, you think back to when we talked about Age of Ultron, and all of a sudden one of the things we both disliked about it was the sort of forced nature of that Black Widow Hulk romance they were trying to get us to believe in. Like, where did that come from? Like, it just kind of came out of nowhere. And honestly, I'm trying to remember between the Vision Wanda pairing and the Black Widow Hulk pairing, like which one of those was worse, because they're both kind of bad. Like they really both weren't set up in a way that you really believe, which, kind of moving forward throughout the MCU, if they're going to have these characters develop these kind of relationships with one another, you'd like to see it hopefully done better. But yeah, from the moment these two pop onto the screen in the black and white set, you believe it, you buy into the fact that these are people who have long-term relationships with one another, that they've been a couple, they've been married for a while, despite the fact that neither of them can remember a detail about it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And, it's some of this episode, it's hard to talk about spoilers without just talking about like recapping scenes that you enjoyed, because again, it's such a simple episode that I feel like some of the spoilers are more theories for me in terms of what some of these things meant. And the one scene that I kind of got a vibe from of maybe these, some of these people that are here is when they have dinner with Vision's boss, because the fact that she's telling her husband, Mr. Hart, when he's choking, stop it. It almost felt like it was programmed to say that, because stop breaking this illusion, stop breaking, what's supposed to be happening. I just kind of got a vibe that there was almost a glitch, so to speak, in the program with him choking. And it was just a weird way for her to interact with him when he was choking. Rob, did you get any vibes from that? Because I just, for some reason, thought that was, again, maybe I'm looking too much into it, but that's how I felt with that scene.
Yeah. So I saw that, and I kind of had a similar reaction afterwards. The first time I watched it, I was like, this is like, she's being annoying. Like, shut up already and do something to help him. Like, she just kept saying, stop it. And she was like pretending like it wasn't a real, potentially life-threatening medical emergency. But like we had mentioned up to this point, we were so bought into just the 50s/60s era time frame that this show was recreating, those, like I said, those old Nick at Night ones. They really gave great care to recreating the overall feel of 50s and 60s TV. If you think about just even the set where the front door is kind of up on a platform and people have to step down into the living room, like nobody's house looks like that, but every old TV set looks just like that. The acting style, the direction, the fact that there's an A plot and a B plot of the episode that are both mostly farcical in nature, and it's a harmless misunderstanding in the end, and nothing really happens. The music, the laugh track, just the campiness, even just something as simple as the way that she makes the rings appear. The way they do it is through a camera trick instead of a digital effect. They just basically have both actors hold their hands still. They shoot it, and then they put the ring, they stop the camera, they put the ring on, and then they shoot it again. So you see there's a slight movement of the hand, and it just appears instantly instead of like fading in like you would if you were doing it digitally. The way there's a few wipes in this episode of transitions from one scene to another, and they use those old effects. It got me to, when they get to that dinner scene, I was so just in the mindset of watching an old episode of I Dream of Jeannie or Bewitched, that when he starts choking and she just won't, like, she just keeps saying, stop it, stop it. Right at that moment, you notice though that those old TV show angles, those old sitcom sort of presentation changes, and it focuses very tightly in on Mrs. Hart, and then it focuses in very tightly on Wanda when she says, Vision, help him. It occurred to me like Mrs. Hart was almost like a broken record. Like she never changed to think that it was serious. There was definitely something almost like a glitch in the Matrix, maybe. And then it goes right back to the 50s and 60s. As soon as he gets back up, it's right back into like Mary Tyler Moore and Dick Van Dyke, almost like this weird thing didn't just happen. And it goes right back into the laugh track. It goes right back in all those things. And then you as the viewer, it's very unsettling. Like, what is going on here? It's really a mind screw. And I want to know more. I want to see where this goes.
Yeah. Harrison, any thoughts on that dinner scene, and maybe potentially, again, that's what's so great, I think, about this show is we could be reading way too much into it, or it could go somewhere. There's so many different directions that this appears it could go in. It keeps you guessing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things of this series so far. We only have 2 episodes, but every detail could mean something incredibly significant, or it could mean absolutely nothing. And the ability to like keep all of that balanced is really impressive. But onto that scene, I kind of just agree with what Rob said. I loved how it went from the traditional, 3 camera set of a 50 sitcom to, the close-ups of the individual characters and the way it changed. And it almost, to me, felt like it was the false reality breaking because, like you guys said, there was a glitch, so to speak. Something's happening the way that this setup, perfect 50s sitcom reality for Wanda is supposed to be set up. Something's preventing that from happening. So it kind of breaks the system and moves in a more realistic camera style. And I just thought that was like really great filmmaking. But it's also interesting because like there's not so much to talk about besides these things, because all we really have is to like assume and make theories based off things, because there's so much that we don't know. We're just guessing, really, because like you said, these first episodes are so simple. And I think it's so much fun to try and draw such just incredibly important meaning out of something that probably in the long run is going to mean absolutely nothing. It's just fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much of it, and it is exciting though because it gives, especially for fans. I think this show can also too, like, this is a show where you could really, kind of like we talked about with The Mandalorian, you really probably wouldn't have to really watch anything from the MCU to even start watching these two episodes. But for, fans and obviously, us who have done shows and theorize and everything like that, it's so much fun after just two episodes to think there's so many different things that, this could be, and well, this couldn't be. Because there's so many of those little moments in this episode where another one is the ad for the toaster. It was funny. Oh, Stark Industries, a toaster, it's like this big deal. But that ticking sound at the end, just before the bread pops up, that red light, it's very ominous. It almost seems like a bomb is ticking. And, again, regardless of whether you like that movie or not, the backstory for the Maximoffs were they sat in a house where their parents died waiting for a Stark Industries bomb to go off, thinking they were going to die. So, there's that little part there that is that messing with Wanda. And if that is meant to be anything, again, who's doing that? Is it somebody trying to break Wanda out of this reality? Is it Wanda herself? Potentially maybe fighting this reality somewhat, because again, to me, I think there's some scenes where you could think that maybe she's not the one doing this. She's not in control of it. So I just am, excited about all those possibilities. But one of the other things too that I wanted to get your thoughts on are, because of the fact that Vision is back, so to speak, he, obviously he's not the one that brought himself back, but what potential is there for him to come back, do you think, as a reoccurring character? Or do you think he's for this show, in terms of they're using him to set up everything else and kind of either break Wanda out, or truly she's, going to go mad, because the rumors are this show directly leads into the multiverse of madness with Doctor Strange. And does that tie into Wanda finding out that what she thinks is real is not real? Rob, what are your thoughts there?
I've always sort of approached my thinking about this show is that it is like a pocket reality, because that is very similar to what we see Wanda do throughout the comics. I think certainly since, really the last big MCU event, since they finished up the Infinity Saga, they've reclaimed the rights to all of their major characters. And there's been all kinds of speculation about how they're going to introduce the Fantastic Four, which we know is now on their calendar. There is, I don't believe there's a release date been assigned, but they've committed to doing, what is this, the fourth time now we're getting the Fantastic Four movie, if you include that Ashcan one that never got released, that was supposed to be completely terrible. Okay, so we're going to try that again. Not that anybody really wants it because of how badly it's gone before, but and the X-Men, they've got the rights to the X-Men now, and WandaVision and the Multiverse of Madness was always going to be what everybody's theorized predominantly, of how some of these characters who really don't have a great reason to not jump in when Thanos attacks, or when there's all of these crazy world-breaking events like the original attack on New York in the first Avengers movie. If Wolverine's kicking around somewhere and Charles Xavier is out there recruiting mutants, like, he's not going to show up and be like, "Hi, we're here to help. What can we do?" It just doesn't make sense. So how are we going to introduce it? Or are they just going to say, "Okay, everybody, there's mutants now. Like, boom, here, Thanos snapped mutants into existence." Like, how are they going to do that? And one of the ways I've always heard kind of people theorize is that introducing this concept of a multiverse through the abilities of Wanda, through the abilities of Doctor Strange. At some point in either this show or that film, we might see that be the way some of these things happen. So how does that correspond to Vision? Anything's possible. We could really see anything if Paul Bettany's on board to do it, and the fans are demanding this character come back. If they have an interesting story to tell, because look, I think they've barely scratched the surface with what they can do with Vision. He might almost be a little too overpowered for the MCU. When you think about everything he's capable of doing, it kind of feels weird. Like he might almost be too powerful to not just solve a lot of their issues pretty quickly. So that might be a consideration, but there could be a lot of ways they use this to reintroduce characters. I mean, Matt, you and I were talking about a year or so ago, I think, that there were rumors that Quicksilver was going to be coming back. And I think from what you told me, it wasn't necessarily the MCU version of Quicksilver that we might be seeing. It would be the X-Men version of him. So this could be almost anything, really. I would like to see Vision again because I just like Paul Bettany so much as the character. I really have no idea what to predict they're going to do because it could be anything.
Yeah, Harrison, question for you too. I actually, Rob just mentioned this, but this is a spoiler, but anybody can go get this information. There are two people that are confirmed part of this cast that really make me think where this show is going and make me wonder because one of them is James Spader. He is cast in this show. Anybody who would know the MCU would know that he voiced Ultron. So where is that going? Also, though, too, cast in this show is Evan Peters. And if you've watched American Horror Story, Harrison, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you haven't based on conversations that we've had. But Evan Peters, for anybody who doesn't know, Evan Peters is the actor who plays Quicksilver in the Fox X-Men universe. I find it maybe way too much of a coincidence that he is cast in this show, and they have been really tight-lipped about what he's doing. So that leads me to believe, like Rob said, we're just in for a magnitude of just everything's coming at us, and this may be the reason why we start getting introduced to maybe the X-Men and mutants, which again I think is the best route for that, is slowly introducing characters maybe in individual movies before we just get a full-blown the X-Men exist. So again, it's hard to talk about spoilers for this episode without just talking about some things that happened and being a theory. But Harrison, did you notice one other thing that I want to ask you too? Did you notice the bottle of wine at the dinner scene and what the translation means for that?
I actually did, yeah. So it says something in some other language that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce. Rough translation to House of Content, or loosely House of Misery, which I think is, a huge hint at the House of M.
Yeah, there's even at the top of
the
bottle of wine, there is an M at the top of that bottle. So again, there's just so many possibilities. But Harrison, just to follow up on that, in terms of everything that happened in this episode, and again, it's when you break it down, it's really not a lot. What would you say is your most intriguing part of episode 1 here for this?
Yeah, it's hard for me to separate episode 1 and episode 2. So let me try and answer this without getting too much into episode 2. The most intriguing part to me is what it could mean and how. So let me just say this first. So I watched episode 1 and I immediately watched episode 2 after, because they were released obviously at the same time. And I watched episode 1 and I saw the wine bottle. I saw all these things. I was like, oh, this really is giving me House of M vibes. You know, this is going to be it. You know, episodes 2 is going to be crazy. And then it was more of the same thing, which I'm not complaining about. It was great, but it was really dialed back. It's toned down. It's slow progression. So it's kind of the same answer I have to both. You know, what the key to most exciting thing about episode 1 and 2 for me is what it could mean. You know, I bet 99% of what I'm guessing is probably wrong, you know, especially with my track history with what I guessed for The Mandalorian. But it's exciting as a huge fan of the comics, particularly the House of M story. I remember reading that years ago and just like being so impressed with that story. And I've wanted an adaptation of that in the MCU for a long time. And, you know, all the things we're getting about the multiverse and how this series is going to directly influence the multiverse of madness with Doctor Strange, with all these things that I have a huge theory about that, you know, I can share if you want me to. I'm just excited for what it could mean. Even if I'm 100% wrong, I just know that exciting things are going to come of this. You know, we're starting to see the hints of it. The way that Vision sees the gaps in the system. You know, because he's a computer, he's looking for a logical, analytical explanation of this. He's starting to see the gaps. The way that Wanda doesn't even know what's going on. You know, the hint that Sword is watching. The hint that maybe someone else is doing this to her. The ticking time bomb toaster. You know, the hints to a PTSD-stricken Wanda. All of these things that could mean so much and also mean nothing. I just know so many exciting things are coming. And it's just exciting to be this excited for MCU content.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. Rob, follow up to that. What do you think of that?
You know, there's, I think one of the first things Harrison had really talked about was just you turn this episode on and you get that MCU title music at the beginning of it, and holy cow, here we go again. Like, we're back, guys, we're back, you know? And then you kind of settle into a fairly benign I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched, Dick Van Dyke, Mary Tyler Moore sort of clone, if you really want to get right down to it. But then there's these other things that are happening that are weird and they're unsettling. I think to me, one of the most intriguing things about this first episode is that commercial. And I think when we talk about the second episode, we'll get to it as well. But there's something very sinister in the way that this commercial is presented, as well as, again, in the second episode, we'll have a chance to talk about it. And I don't know if you guys caught it, but when that toaster pops, it sounds an awful lot like the same sound they use for Iron Man's priming of a repulsor blast. If you didn't hear it, go back and listen again, because I'm telling you, it is the same sound effect. I did not catch it the first time I watched it, but on my rewatch, right away I went, hey, wait a second, that's that sort of high-pitched whine that you get right before Iron Man releases a blast. And obviously it's a Stark Industries product, and the ticking of the time bomb, I didn't really catch the bomb reference the first time I saw it, but the second time, immediately I caught that that's what it was, and did make that connection back to Age of Ultron, which, man, I really had no intention of ever rewatching that turd fest of a movie, but I might have to go back now and catch anything that might have clues that they're going to reference on this show, because it seems like they're drawing from a lot of what happened there. And certainly they'll be drawing from the other films that she's appeared in.
Yeah, just to follow up too on, the ad, because again, there's so many little things that could be involved with that. Even the dialogue that are in those ads, could mean a lot and could mean nothing, because in the toaster ad, it says, forget your past, this is your future. Is that a reference to what is happening right now? Wanda, forget about it. Like, this fake reality is your future. You're going to stay here. Does that mean anything? And what does it mean that, Harrison, if you noticed this too, the same two people show up in these commercials, and the next commercial is in episode 2, but it's the same man and woman in each commercial, which again, I think has some significance, but it could just be nothing. And we've said how that is super exciting.
Yeah. There's so many things that I like. I just want to like juice the pulpy meaning out of it that probably really is nothing. But yeah, it creates opportunity from some really, really exciting theories that it's going to be really fun to see unravel.
Yeah,
We are going to be wrong about so many things this whole season, and I'm so excited to be so wrong about so many things, because just when we think they're going to zig, they'll zag on us. They're going to drop these things, and we'll get to the final episode. We'll hit the climax of this season. And the single most important callback will be literally the most minuscule thing that we didn't even think of.
Yeah, like
Right.
seriously, it'll be like, oh my God, I can't believe that actually meant something. Like, I can't believe that meant something.
It was the lobster all along.
Right, right, exactly. Like, holy cow. But yeah, I mean, this episode, just to kind of reiterate it's so simple, but to see MCU content again, and I give them so much credit for, regardless of what we get in future episodes, to start the show off like this. I applaud the effort from them to go in this direction, to give us something different, because I feel like it's a nice break, because we've had so many movies with so much action, so much emotional weight through these movies that, again, we are probably going to get hit with a gut punch here in this season, but it was nice to have some levity. It was nice to have laughs, and just kind of kick back and, really relax with an MCU project that, you kind of don't do in the movies. It's not like I'm sitting, tense during the movie, so to speak. But for me, it was really nice to just relax and take in a show on a casual basis, but have it be in this MCU universe.
The fate of the free world does not hang over this episode, which you think back to the last several things we've seen, the Snapping wiped out half of existence, and their mission to prevent it and their mission to undo it. You can't really raise the stakes much higher than that in a film. So yeah, I mean, certainly with the Ant-Man film and Ant-Man and the Wasp as well, there's some real light moments, some real fun moments where it's not really earth-shattering that the mission they're on, but it is still important. And those movies are just fun as well. But a lot of the other ones, it's heavy. There's certainly moments throughout the MCU that are very funny, but the stakes are very high. And so far, the stakes are not high. I expect that to change, though.
Yeah, Harrison, I'll ask you to cap us off here, going first. But what's your overall thought on this episode, and what's your overall rating for episode 1?
To give you my overall rating, let me just throw this fun little Easter egg that I saw. Yeah, at the very beginning when the episode starts and Wanda's cleaning the dishes, in the production design was just perfect. The way the effects were done, the plate floating with the wire work, and how it goes and breaks on Vision's head. He's like, "Oh, my wife and flying saucers," and she replies and says, "Oh, my husband and his indestructible head." Like, that statement, if you think about it, is devastating, because his head was literally destroyed twice. And
right.
that is probably leading to the events that we're now seeing, that having experienced that twice, Wanda having to experience that twice. But that statement is said with so much joviality, to invent a word, that it's just, like you said, I know that the stakes are high. I know that something is going on beyond what it seems. There's more than meets the eye. But it's just another episode of I Love Lucy or Bewitched or whatever. It's two people trying to fit in to the suburbs, and the heart of that is two cast members that make this so endearing and so much fun, and just really sold me on it. And I'm excited for more of that lightheartedness, and I'm also excited for the stakes to get ridiculously wacky and ridiculously high, and I know that both of them are going to be incredibly enjoyable on either end. The more lighthearted sitcominess, and the multiverse creating, MCU altering whatever is going to happen. I'm just excited for what's to come. If they can start a series this great, I have so much trust in what's going to come.
Awesome. Rob, your closing thoughts on episode 1 of WandaVision.
I enjoyed it. I thought there were parts that moved kind of slow, but on purpose, because the parts that move slow just make the parts that are kind of making you wonder what the heck is going on. They land that much harder. You kind of need to be lulled into this sense of everything's okay and it's just campy before you kind of realize, oh no, this is going to be different. So as far as my rating out of the total number of reels, I'm going to go 4.5 reels on this. I was really intrigued by what was going on. The final Easter egg I'll leave you with is I really enjoyed. Obviously, I mentioned I've enjoyed the homage to television that we see in this, but one of the things that if you don't really know a lot about television and TV production, you may not have necessarily caught, when you get to the end and they have the green dots, the red dots, and the blue dots. Well, RGB dots are all the primary colors of light, and that's what's used in these old tube TVs to actually make the colors that you see. It's all just combinations of red, green, and blue. And if you ever, I don't know anybody who still has an old tube TV, but if you ever actually get like a magnifying glass and get right up on top of one of those things, it will look very much like what we're presented with at the end of this episode. So it really makes it like you're jumping into the TV to kind of almost escape in some ways. Even towards the end of this, you notice as the credits roll for the fake WandaVision show, it pulls back from that, that 4:3 aspect ratio that we got with standard definition, and it pulls back to the 16:9 aspect ratio of high definition television, referencing that this is now the real world and somebody is watching this. So who is watching it? How are they watching it? And what is it? It's such a it's so intriguing that I'm going to be just as excited every Friday night to sit down and see what's going on.
Yeah, Rob, I'd agree with you. I'd say 4.5 out of 5. And one Easter egg that I really enjoyed was, and this will be more talked about in episode 2 because there's a little bit more on the nose hints to this organization, but you definitely can tell if anybody's familiar with it that it's an organization called SWORD that's monitoring this situation, at least one part of it. I really like that because when we get to episode 2 here, there's some pretty significant people that could show up as part of this organization. But also, too, if it's just an Easter egg, great. I just love it. But the way that the credits roll and start to break away is literally the exact same transition as comic panels in the House of M comic book. I really like that. And again, it's probably just an Easter egg and, catch it moment for fans that have read those comics and everything like that. But again, for me, I love it. That's the Easter egg that I'll leave with. But I thought episode 1 was really good. So listeners, we are going to have episode 2 coming out really soon here. We're recording that as we're recording this one. So thanks for tuning in to Mondays with Maximoff, and we look forward to having you listen to episode 2 and our future installments. So look forward to those episodes coming up every Monday. Thanks for your time, everyone.